Order, order. Patrick Hurley to move the motion.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I'm very pleased to have secured this debate today because employment policy can sometimes feel very abstract in this place. We talk about things like rates and targets and programmes, but for the people that we represent, employment can be intensely personal. It's about confidence, dignity, routine, and feeling that you've got something to contribute. I know all of this from personal experience. The depression that I fell into in the mid-90s at the end of the Tories' last disastrous spell in government, when I couldn't get a job, had a long-lasting effect on my life. Growing up in what was then, and still is by many measures, one of the poorest boroughs in the country, the pressure to find a job, any job to be honest, was immense. But the availability of jobs didn't match that pressure. The local factory had closed down in 1991. My hometown had barely any industry left to speak of, and most of the low-paid temporary jobs I could find were in the next town along, almost a 2-hour walk away for a lad who wanted to work but couldn't afford the bus fare to get to the factory. And that's why I want to make the case today for place-based employment support, support that is rooted in communities, shaped by local need, and delivered by people who understand the realities of the lives that they're working with. In my own Southport constituency, I see it time and time again that the people furthest from the labour market are not those who don't want to work. They're the people who've got things like caring responsibilities, or they've got health issues, they've got gaps in their work history, or for whatever reason, they just can't get a break. In my local authority area alone, this equates to over 26,000 people. And what they need isn't another box-ticking exercise. They need someone who knows their area, knows what the local jobs are, and someone who's got the time to treat them as a person. And that's why I want to put on record my thanks for the work of several of these place-based employment support programmes across the north of England. Firstly, there's the Big Onion in my part of the world in Southport. They do things differently, and that's precisely why they're effective. Their work is rooted in trust. They help people rebuild confidence, develop skills, and in many cases, explore things like self-employment or community enterprise as a route back into work. They don't rush people. Their approach recognises that for many residents, the first step towards employment is simply believing that you've got something to offer. That kind of progress doesn't always show up immediately in headline figures, but it is absolutely essential if we want to make sustainable outcomes for the long term. There's also Zinc. It's a charity based in Buxton, started out as a food bank, but they soon branched out into offering employment support and debt advice once they investigated the drivers of local food bank demand. Their most innovative programme is called Microjobs. It offers small, paid roles tailored to people who are far from the jobs market, often people who've been affected by homelessness or past substance abuse. I will give way.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for giving way. Would he agree that place-based employment schemes are a vital way of converting local strengths into local jobs, and that sector-specific initiatives can and should be tailored to the circumstances of individual constituencies, such as mine in North Down, where there's a particular potential in tourism, hospitality, and in the wider marine and coastal economy?
In amongst a long line of things that place-based employment initiatives can do well, that's one of them. So I thank the member for his interruption. I mentioned this programme called Microjobs. 3/4 of those who are on the microjob subsequently move into part-time or full-time work within 6 months. We've also got the Recruitment Junction, which does work up in the North East, mainly in Newcastle, and they place people with criminal convictions into paid work. They work with local employers to identify skill shortages, and then they identify suitable candidates who they then meet and help them renew their qualifications, they help them write their CVs, they help them prepare for interviews. So far, they've placed almost 900 people with criminal convictions into paid work with a 66% retention rate. Fewer than 5% of those that they place re-offend, compared to around 24% nationally. And I also want to commend the work of the Transform Lives company. Their model deliberately breaks away from what many people expect employment support to look like. It's welcoming, it's informal, it feels safe, and for many people, many participants on their schemes, that alone is transformative. People who go to the Transform Lives company are supported not just with job search, but also with things like confidence and well-being and life skills. They're listened to rather than lectured at. And as a result, people who would never normally engage with employment services do so willingly. I think that should make us stop and think about how our national system is experienced on the ground.
I thank my old friend for giving way. This is a rather unexpected intervention, except for it reminded me of the Job Plus scheme that is being run on one of our council estates in Leighton, where L&Q have been going out and actively knocking on doors, which we've seen not only the young people that were the target of that assistant coming back into the work environment, but also their parents. Would he agree with me that this is the type of scheme that we need to see extended and see funding continued into the year, so that we can see other people brought back into the working environment?
Indeed. I will promise members that I did not give my honourable friend advance sight of my speech, but I will indeed be coming on to talk about Jobs Plus in due course. It's an amazing system, an amazing scheme. So I've already touched on some of my own experiences as a young man, but I think it's worth going back to it at this point, because I want members to get a sense of being put in the shoes of someone who would have really benefited from one of these schemes had they been running back when I was in my late teens and early 20s. Members will know many families have got funny anecdotes about things that children have said. My family's no different. And perhaps unwisely, I'm going to share the funny anecdote that my family say that I said when I was a child. Because apparently back in about 1982 or something, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I said something amusing to my family, and they teased me about it for years afterwards, as they would. Apparently, I asked my parents one day why they watched the news on the telly. In my childhood brain, this made no sense at all. My mum was a dinner lady. My dad worked nights in the local car factory, about 6 or 7 miles away. But I'd got it into my head as a little kid that the TV news was only for people who didn't have jobs. And that was obviously not my mum and dad. My mum and dad had jobs. What were they doing watching the TV news? It was only about 20 years later when it dawned on me. In the early 1980s, it wasn't for people who didn't have jobs. TV news felt like it was only about people who didn't have jobs. Because every night on the 6 o'clock news, the headlines were about the unemployment figures, the latest round of layoffs in some critical industry or other, the factory closures, the countless thousands being put on the sick as a way of keeping the official numbers of job seekers off the balance sheet. And I grew up in Knowsley in that context, in a local authority area that had been drawn up in such a way a decade earlier so as to exclude all sixth form provision. This was an area that was being written off. And I was a poorly qualified, unskilled lad in his late teens, living in a town with few opportunities and suffering with my mental health because I couldn't see a way out. By way of contrast, these days my city region is benefiting from the award-winning Cradle to Career scheme. It provides holistic mental health and wellbeing support and a focus on dealing with the underlying causes of youth crime and antisocial behaviour. And just as importantly, it's not just dealing with the metrics of success that make the headlines in the press, but it deals in the testimony of the people whose lives have been turned round. I'll return to my broader point. Many of the approaches I've described echo the work done in recent years on rethinking employment support fundamentally. That work has made a compelling case for a more wraparound employment service, one that links employment with skills and with health, housing and local economic conditions, and it gives frontline staff the flexibility to respond to individual circumstances. We've seen this, as my honourable friend mentioned earlier, through things like Jobs Plus. They've demonstrated that embedding employment support directly within social housing communities can reach people who've been economically inactive for years. Early evidence shows not just people moving into work, but people gaining improvements in their confidence, their well-being, their readiness, their resilience, the things that actually make employment sustainable for people. I'll give way.
Amy Stone.
A very sincere speech, I listened to with great interest. He talks about the confidence of youngsters. One of the great industries which was run down during the Conservative years of rule was the nuclear industry. I believe it will be great one day again. And at Doonray, in my constituency, they have still today an apprenticeship scheme which gives youngsters great confidence for the future. I hope that will be carbon copied for the future by many, many industries as we revive our fortunes of what we're good at in this country.
And I think that pinpoints precisely why place-based schemes are so important, because what's useful and what's necessary for my part of the country is not going to be useful for your own, for his own. And I think that difference can really make a positive impact on local people's lives. So I talk about Jobs Plus and the good things it can do, but despite that evidence, too many of the programmes that I've mentioned today exist in a state of uncertainty. They've got short-term funding, they've got delayed decisions that are forcing the providers to plan for winding down, even when their outcomes are improving. Now, that's not a sensible way to run employment policy, and it risks losing exactly the sort of expertise and relationships that we should be encouraging and that we should be building on. So I say, if we're serious about increasing employment and tackling inactivity, we also need to be serious about how that support that's needed is delivered. Central systems have their place, but they can't do everything. We also need long-term backing for place-based approaches, proper partnership with community organisations, and we need to collectively have the confidence to move away from one-size-fits-all solutions. Over 9 million people of working age are economically inactive in the UK, and long-term sickness is now the single largest driver of inactivity among 16 to 64-year-olds. In Southport and across the country, organisations like the Big Onion and Transform Lives and schemes like Cradle to Career are already doing the work we say we want to see. The question is whether national policy is willing to learn from them and support them properly.
On that point, I thank him for giving way. This actually is the planned intervention, but he's making a very powerful point about place-based intervention. And last week I welcomed the Minister of Industry to Build Academy in Wanstead, which is an incredible scheme that's providing accessible training to local people in construction skills. The point he was making is that we need to focus on these fantastic young learners to make sure that they're site ready and capable of going directly into full-time local employment or apprenticeships. Does my honourable friend agree that what we need now is for learning programmes like this to be shared so that they can be permanent, addressing the issues that he raised, and that they can be scaled up and rolled out around the country?
I do indeed agree wholeheartedly with my honourable friend's comment there. Not just scaled and rolled out, but we can also learn and do peer-to-peer learning so that the best of what works in one part of the country might also be applicable elsewhere. I'll wrap up now. I hope the Minister will reflect on some of what I've mentioned this morning, this afternoon, and will reflect on how future employment policy can better embed these place-based delivery schemes, giving local providers the certainty that they need, and ensuring that employment support is something people feel genuinely helped by, not just processed through. Thank you.
Questions that this House has considered place-based employment support programmes. I'm going to call the front bench at 5:08. Do the maths. Ayub Khan.
It's a pleasure to be serving under your chairmanship, and can I begin by thanking the honourable member for Southport for securing this important debate. In my constituency of Birmingham Perry Bar, the scale of youth unemployment is stark and deeply concerning. We are among the worst affected areas in the country, with 1 in every 6 eligible adults, that's 16.1%, currently not working. These are not just statistics, they represent thousands of young people whose talents are being wasted and whose futures are being put on hold. Across the West Midlands, around 29,000 young people are classed as unemployed, with youth unemployment rates in parts of Birmingham, Wolverhampton and Walsall running at double the national average. The sheer scale of the challenge facing our region and underline the urgent need for growth and genuine job creation. Young people are not short of ambition or willingness to work. What they are short of are real opportunities, secure jobs, quality training and pathways into employment that offer dignity and progression. Too many are stuck in a cycle of rejection, short-term work or being shut out altogether. I hope the Minister will detail how young people are being actively supported into large infrastructure projects such as the HS2 and the large housing programmes. As the former Secretary of State for Work and Pensions said, to get Britain growing, we need to get Britain working again. And I wholly agree with that sentiment. But I cannot agree with the government's approach of removing universal credit from young people if they do not take up a job. There could be a whole host of reasons as to why they can't. Punitive policies do not create jobs. They do not address the structural barriers young people face, and they risk pushing already vulnerable people into further hardship. Young people are struggling to get jobs, which is being intensified by wider changes in the economy. New research suggests that the UK is now losing more jobs than it is creating because of AI, and that Britain is being hit harder than any other major economy. According to a recent study by Morgan Stanley, British companies reported that AI had resulted in net job losses over the past 12 months, with employment down by 8%. The worst performance among comparable economies, including the United States, Japan, Germany, and Australia. This matters because it means young people are entering a labour market that is shrinking and not expanding. Getting Britain working again does not require sanctions. We need investment, collaboration with local employers, properly funded skills programmes, and an economy that works for every region, not just a few. I want to commend the excellent work of the West Midlands Combined Authority under the Mayor Richard Parker, which is building up skills and training our young people in areas like construction, the arts, tech, life sciences and clean energy. But I urge more support from central government to ensure this is happening across the Midlands and the wider economy. If we are truly serious about growth, then we must be serious about our young people. That means backing them, not blaming them. It means opportunity and not punishment. And it means ensuring that places like Birmingham Perry Bar are not left behind because we are at the heart of our national recovery. Thank you, Chair.
Lee Ingham.
To serve under your chairship, and I'd also like to thank the Honourable Member for Southport for bringing forward what I consider to be a truly vital discussion. Colleagues won't be surprised to hear me talking about towns today. I am the proud product of one, and I proudly represent 2 towns, Stafford and Eccleshall, and it's important to be here today discussing them, because I want to use this debate to make a really simple but important point about place. Because far too often, towns like Stafford are described in relation to somewhere else. We're labelled a commuter town because we have excellent rail connections, and we do. You can be in London really quickly, you can be in Birmingham quickly, and you can be in Manchester quickly. But Stafford shouldn't be defined by its neighbouring cities. And a child growing up in Stafford shouldn't be told, just go to a city to access better employment opportunities. So if our policy only sees us as part of someone else's labour market, it will misunderstand us and the brilliant talent that we have in my constituency. Our young people deserve to build happy, successful lives in the town that they call home. And there's so much potential for that. We're home to GE Vernova, whose Stafford site produces the only HVDC transformers manufactured in this country, which is absolutely key to our national energy security. We have Bostik's UK headquarters, where world-leading adhesives are made. We have Arco Professional Safety Services, who keep those working in risky roles safe, including off Big Ben right here, the Elizabeth Tower, should I say, apologies. And we have so many wonderful SMEs. And we're supported by Stafford College, widely acknowledged to be the best college in the country, with back-to-back outstanding Ofsted ratings, working closely with local employers to build the technical and vocational skills that our industries require. Stafford is a county town, one where people are proud to live, but where people feel its potential is not yet being fulfilled, and that's a pattern that research from the University of Southampton shows is happening across the country, and a pattern that we must address as a government. We must provide the tools for every community to ensure their town flourishes, and let's be frank, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. So when we talk about designing employment programmes around place, we are talking about a massive opportunity for our towns and promoting our towns, building secure jobs and secure futures for residents, catered to our national diversity. Because the economy of places like Stafford really shouldn't be trickle-down cities. It must mean recognising the strengths of towns like Stafford, particularly in manufacturing and energy infrastructure. It must mean aligning skills provision directly with local employer demand, rather than assuming this opportunity sits elsewhere. And it's also time we stop telling our talented young people to move away to London or Manchester and start recognising the potential our towns have as economic engines in their own right.
The Honourable Lady and
Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, in Northern Ireland, we're doing a collaborative, localised model through the Arts Community Network. And what we've done, which what the Honourable Lady is referring to in Stafford, we have identified job opportunities. HGV training is one that costs about £3,500 to do that. Also security training. But the local Arts Community Network and others, and government as well in the Northern Ireland Assembly, have come together to ensure that those job opportunities are available for people in my constituency. And many of those people are now driving HGV lorries. Lots of them people are now in security jobs and training as well. So when it comes to helping the people, it inspires people from deprived areas. And I think that's what the Honourable Lady was talking about in relation to Stafford.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I completely agree. I think recognising the talent we have in our towns and making sure that all our government programmes are working to support that is integral. Because I do welcome the government's investment on growth and opportunity, and we're seeing this revised investment in towns. I think Pride in Place is actually a really good example. Town of Culture, which aren't necessarily employment programmes, but they lay the foundations of our commitment to regeneration across the country. And the upcoming High Street strategy also has lots of potential to help with that investment. And while, investment into UK cities is undoubtedly important, it's vital to remember that most of our population live in towns, and many of those people are feeling left behind, frustrated by decline on their high streets under the Conservative government, and sceptical that politicians here in Westminster either understand them or the places that they call home. So this is a chance to show that we do, and it's exactly what Labour governments do better than anyone else. Because what we see time and again is that working with communities and using their local knowledge and experience is how we regenerate our areas best. So today, I'd like to ask the Minister, what conversations is she having with colleagues to make sure that towns have a voice in designing their local employment strategies? And what steps is the government taking to ensure young people who grow up in towns like Stafford can secure well-paid jobs in the town they call home? Towns like Stafford are central to our government's plan for growth, and I welcome employment programmes that recognise that as the reality.
Amanda Hack.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Dr Murison. I want to thank the Honourable Member for Southport for giving us the opportunity to speak in this debate. In my career before being elected, I was involved in a number of successful place-based employment schemes, including having a direct responsibility for delivering some of this work within a housing association. So I'm a strong advocate for this approach, and I will speak about this later on in my speech. However, I wanted to share with the members today, as a member of the Work and Pensions Select Committee, we visited Durham just last week to speak to participants and employees on the Connect to Work programme run by Durham Enable and Triage. They offer voluntary supported employment initiatives designed to help people with learning disabilities, autism, health conditions and complex barriers to employment to find and sustain meaningful work. Programmes like this offer a great example of why and how place-based employment really works. In Durham, they use the supported employment model of place, train, maintain, which focus on finding the right job first, then offering training and then ongoing support. And I'll break that down a little further. So stage 1, place. Finding the right job for an individual and emphasising that employees are key to that delivery and development of engaging with future employers. Working with the person to discover who they are, as well as the local job market, is a key principle to that. Stage 2, train. The Durham enabled future employees that they were benefiting from the right support. It was also clear that this support inspired confidence. One person we spoke to been recently made redundant from a long-term job, and Durham Enable had helped them to navigate the more complicated process nowadays of job applications that they never needed before. And stage 3, maintain, offering ongoing support to our participants and employees to navigate reasonable adjustments in the workplace while applying for things like access for work. I also want to briefly mention Jobs Plus, as has already been mentioned today, and information from the Learning and Work Institute. The latter found that in 2003, social housing tenants were nearly twice as likely to be out of work and more twice as likely to be disabled. When in work, they're twice as likely to be in lower skilled work on average and paid a third less than people who live in other housing tenures. Job Plus, which is being currently piloted on 10 sites across England, is a key initiative which brings together tenants, landlords and key agencies to provide targeted support to those that need it. It works because of that joint commitment and the targeted support they provide. And in fact, it's just the simplicity of the scheme that works overall. The non-reliance on system-based referrals sets Job Plus apart from most other employment programmes. All they need to know is where somebody lives and then simply help them. It will also be no surprise as a long-standing housing professional that will also advocate for the work done via housing associations. East Midlands Housing, based in North West Leicestershire, is a great local employer, but also they are also part of the Place Shapers initiative, which is about creating place, another important part of employer-based support, because it means putting support right at the centre of a community, and above all else, it's the community that knows how best to boost the engagement and to support one another. I want to conclude that by emphasising that key point to take away from today is we don't need to reinvent the wheel to be successful. We need to look at what's been done already. And I just wanted to agree with my honourable friend for Stockport about limited contracting. My experience of this over 2 decades is that we have great schemes. They're just often just reinvented. What we lack then is consistency. Consistency develops our communities. Consistency develops the long-term commitment from employers that we need to see real change in place-based support. When schemes come and go, you lose that momentum. So I'd like to ask the Minister, how will we breed that consistency to ensure place-based schemes have a place in the employment supported table for a long term, not just for the short term? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Morrison. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and also to my honourable friend for Southport for bringing this important debate on place-based employment schemes. Because local jobs, local skills and local employment support that's rooted in communities will change individuals' lives as well as boosting local economies. And my residents in Wolverhampton North East will deeply understand that. In previous debates on young people who are not in education, employment or training, I have raised that this challenge cannot be solved by a single national programme or by one-size-fits-all policies from here in Whitehall, but instead it needs local solutions that are rooted in local labour markets and built around developing and building people's skills and aspirations. And that is the approach that I am calling and welcome the Labour government to continue to work closely with our Mayor, Richard Parker, and also with local councils. In Wolverhampton, through the Wolves at Work Employment Hub at the I-10, residents are not handed generic advice, but generic advice, but time is invested in individuals to support them as they are needed, where over 1,800 residents have had employment advice and successful job matching, with more than 40% of those supported aged under 25. Place-based employment support that's rooted in local partnerships and focused on real outcomes. The Open Door programme literally does that. It opens up opportunities by giving paid work experience to those who might otherwise never get that first chance. And Labour support for sector-based work academy programmes, a practical route into work, and the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer, part of the Getting Britain Working Plan, shows how this government is focused on tailored, targeted support that will meet local needs. The major funding package for youth employment, benefiting around 1 million young people, is a sign of Labour's commitment to tackling the long-term issue of NEETs. Now, behind every statistic on NEETs is a young person who needs that guided pathway with the support that they need to help with their specific needs. And in Wolverhampton, we know that 2.6% of young people aged 16 to 17 were NEET in 2025. Now, whilst I appreciate that is lower than the national average, it's still hundreds of young people who deserve the opportunity to see themselves in a good quality job and a career that's suited for them. So for too long, under previous governments, employment support, skills funding and local growth strategies have operated in silos, and we have seen inconsistencies. But this Labour government is doing things differently. We are aligning skills with jobs, investing in local employment hubs for the long term, and backing councils and mayoral combined authorities to shape programmes that work for their places. Now, I call the Minister to outline how she will address the challenge to scale up that success, so that where someone grows up no longer determines whether they can get on in life. And I call the Minister to fully back place-based employment schemes to connect people to jobs for hope, ambition and action. Thank you.
Mr Bailey, you're on my call list, but you haven't been bobbing. Are you done? Cool. In that case, it's John Mill.
Thank you, Dr Morrison, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I'd also like to thank the Honourable Member for Southport for shining a light on this important issue. So the Liberal Democrats strongly support the principles of devolution and localism, so we welcome the government's stated ambition to expand place-based employment support. Employment conditions vary so much across the country, a purely national strategy could never work. However, local delivery is only half the story. A succession of governments have been adept at passing on new responsibilities to local government, but not necessarily the budget to match. So the Liberal Democrats will not support reforms that simply shift costs and risk onto councils without the funding, systems and accountability to make them work. So I ask the Minister, what extra powers or funding flexibility will the government give local and combined authorities so that they can design and deliver place-based employment strategies that genuinely reflect their local labour markets? Of course, improving employment prospects is also about removing barriers. Estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands of people are economically inactive due to long-term sickness linked to NHS waiting lists, and more than 600,000 people have reduced their working hours while waiting for treatment. too much of existing work support consists of generic help with CV writing and basic qualifications such as maths and English. Although important, this does not go far enough to answer individual needs, especially people with specific health conditions. The current system seems to work best when providing adjustments for people already in work, who then become disabled, but fails those who are trying to get a job in the first place. The practical adjustments through access to work are frequently only agreed after the job offer, and that is too late in the process. So the case of one of my constituents from Horsham, Amanda, illustrates what can go wrong when systems don't join up. Amanda is deaf. She got a job. She needed an interpreter funded through access to work. But a basic administrative breakdown between her employer and the DWP resulted in her support being refused. Long delays in making awards are causing real trouble, and I believe it's 4 times, the waiting list has increased by 4 times in just a few years. The current system does seem simply unable to respond to individual circumstances. So the Liberal Democrats argue that devolution must be matched with stable funding and enough resources to support implementation. There's a journey to go on here, and as we embark on it, we need to be honest about a legacy of negative culture within the current system. According to a survey by Turn to Us in 2025, 64% of claimants say that the system is trying to catch them out. Only 15% said support from work coaches is useful, while 55% of universal credit claimants say that claiming benefits has worsened their health. This sounds less like an employment system, more like a deterrence system. And this tactic has backfired. Job hunting is a tough process. Morale matters. Totally undermining unemployed job seekers by treating them like benefits grounders has only ended up making sure that's exactly how they remain, stuck on benefits. The pressure on job seekers to demonstrate industrial quantities of applications every week has destroyed trust on both sides. And I've seen how local employers in my constituency of Horsham have disengaged with the job centre. They feel that the applicants they're being sent aren't really interested. They see that they're only just trying to meet their weekly quota of applications. So the Liberal Democrats welcome the trial of place-based approaches such as Jobs Plus. It's too soon to judge, but the early signs do suggest higher engagement and improved confidence and well-being. We need to get everyone, both job seekers and employers, believing and trusting in the system again. And so we come to funding, and here we need some clarity. Council budgets are already under very severe strain, and rural areas like mine in West Sussex face some of the greatest barriers to employment support, yet they're also facing some of the stiffest demands and the tighter settlement under the new local government finance settlement. Councils are concerned that Jobs Plus funding ends in March 2026, yet the full evaluation has not yet been completed. So I asked the Minister what long-term funding certainty will be provided to ensure that community-based employment support is not cut off just as it starts to deliver results. And finally, we come to the issue of national oversight. It's vital that we ensure place-based employment support is properly integrated with job centres and national programmes like Restart to avoid duplication and confusion. So I asked the Minister, will the government commit to clear outcome measurement and regular public reporting so Parliament can hold the DWP to account for what these programmes actually deliver? And alongside that, what is the government doing to properly integrate local employment schemes with national programmes like Restart and job centre services to make everything work together effectively? So to conclude, Liberal Democrats believe that place-based employment support can reduce inequality, improve outcomes and help people into sustainable work. But it must be backed by long-term funding, a competent administration and clear national accountability. Otherwise, localism will end up as a slogan, not a solution. Thank you.
Cross.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Dr Murison, and I would like to thank and congratulate the honourable gentleman, the member for Southport, for securing this important debate. Getting people into work should be a core priority for any government, and I know members across this House share that view. I and the Conservative Party wholly believe that work is the best route out of poverty. Work brings independence, dignity, opportunity and the ability for people across the country to provide for themselves and their families. It gives meaning and purpose and has real, proven mental health benefits. That is why successive Conservative governments have put into place a lot of employment support schemes. The Restart scheme was one example, launched in 2020 and gave tailored intensive support to job seekers who were often in need of more support. I appreciate that the current government recognises the challenges of joblessness too, and there is a genuine desire to tackle the problem. Whether through local authorities or the private sector, there are many ways of attempting to improve employment outcomes and get people into work. There is a clear difference between broader national schemes and localised place-based approaches. It is clear that employment challenges in, for example, Carlisle, are very different to those in Cardiff, and that tailored localised support can be a more effective way of helping people in those areas to gain meaningful, lasting employment. The Jobs Plus scheme, which has been mentioned a few times so far this afternoon, which was started under the previous Conservative government, is an example of this. The scheme was inspired by the response to problems in the United States and has been carried out in the UK through social landlords convened and organised like Communities That Work. These pilots were carried out in a diverse range of areas, such as Swale in Kent and Toxteth in Liverpool, and a useful road test for a scheme that would show how it would work in different parts of the country. The evaluation last autumn, written by the Institute for Employment Studies and Learning to Work, said that there had been positive early indications that Jobs Plus model could be implemented effectively across the UK. There is, of course, a long way to go. We hope for the success of place-based employment schemes and for each area to see an uptick in employment. There are hard-working and committed people in communities across the country who are doing their utmost to improve the life chances of others. Effective wraparound support is essential, tackling those complex barriers to work that so many of our constituents are facing in their own communities. We certainly know that a one-size-fits-all approach from Whitehall is quite often not the answer, and that devolving power down to local people and local decision-makers can be the best way to achieve real, tangible progress and outcomes. However, we recognise that there are core principles that apply to helping people throughout the country when they're trying to get a job, and we must also guard against a postcode lottery where some areas have a good level of support and others are, quite frankly, left behind. There is a clear balance to be struck here, and I would like the Minister to explain how they will make sure that this balance is struck. I would also be interested to hear the Minister's view on the private sector involvement. From my perspective, relying on state interventions alone doesn't work, and we will need to unleash private enterprise, particularly those small and medium-sized enterprises. But one of the current problems in the British economy, indeed in our jobs market, is that businesses of all sizes and in all communities do not have the confidence in the current economic and regulatory environment to hire. Indeed, the Minister does not need me to rehearse the impact of the government's decisions of things like hiking national insurance or the Employment Rights Bill, the impact that this is having on jobs. I hear the impact from my constituents, and I do not believe that she and others on the government benches do not hear the same things too. A thriving economy and business confidence really is the best way to boost employment across the UK. That simply isn't the case at the moment, with job vacancies down and unemployment up from 4.2% when the government came to power in July 2024 to 5.1% today. There are 700,000 university graduates who are out of work and on benefits, and nearly 1 million neat young people. These are sobering numbers and will impact on constituents of every member in this room, the length and breadth of the country. They impact people now, but will impact them also into their futures. Those numbers put a huge pressure on employment support programmes, often overwhelming them. We want employees to feel comfortable in hiring people, not imposing hiring freezes because they're concerned about the state of the economy. And I'll briefly focus on my constituency as others have today. I often talk in this place about the oil and gas sector and the impact that policies are having on jobs. Employment, particularly locally in North East Scotland, is wholly reliant on the oil and gas sector. Every other sector, every other industry is related to it. The hospitality sector, taxis, shops, the housing market, everything relies on this one sector. So whether people support oil and gas or not, whether people believe in the energy transition or not, is almost regardless to the impact that this is having on jobs. No other constituency in the country is seeing as many job losses in a single sector as we are across North East Scotland. And if this was happening in any other member's constituency, they would not be sitting silent. They would be fighting for the employment and the futures of their constituents. And that is what I am doing, and that is what must be done if we are to ensure that place-based employment support is not needed in Aberdeenshire to the extent that it may need to if the oil and gas sector is allowed to collapse. So I certainly welcome robust place-based employment support, but I call on the government to link these in with broader economic changes that allow businesses to flourish and encourage them to take the chance on younger people and those currently out of work. I thank the Minister in advance for her response and thank the member again for bringing this debate.
Johnson.
It's a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairmanship, Dr Morrison, this afternoon. And I want to start, of course, by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Southport, for securing this debate. As he's rightly pointed out, employment can often get bound up in the numbers and targets and rates. But actually, what we all know is that fundamentally this is about people, and it's about families, and it's about communities and the world of work. Work is a huge part of people's lives, and we should never underestimate how much it matters that we support people into work and help them succeed in their careers. I want to thank all honourable members who have spoken this afternoon in what I think is an excellent debate, talking about the support that their constituents are receiving already in many cases. My honourable friend for Stafford talked about her local employers, but also about the vital role of towns in economic growth and regeneration. And I'm also grateful for my honourable friend for North West Leicestershire, who brings great knowledge in her role on the Select Committee and her experience prior to entering this place, and what she talked about, particularly around the Connect to Work programme, which I'm going to say a little bit more about. And my honourable friend for Wolverhampton North East, who spoke about NEETs, but also spoke about the excellent work going on in her area already. That's supporting individuals rooted in partnership. And at the end, she talked about hope, ambition and action. I think that was a very powerful message. And the honourable lady who speaks for the opposition, I just would gently remind her that there are over 500,000 people entering employment over the course of the last year. So just to remember that. Now, I just want to pay tribute to what my honourable friend said and his commitment to helping his constituents into good work. And it was great to hear him champion some of the excellent work of the Big Onion in Southport, of the Cradle to Career scheme in the Liverpool City region more widely, and of various place-based employment support providers across the north of England. And I was particularly interested in Zinc and their micro jobs and helping people to get then into part-time and then full-time work as well. And my honourable friend, I think, talked with great eloquence about the challenges that he faced growing up in an area where the local factory had closed and where work was really hard to come by. And it totally underlines the fact that where you live is often a big factor in the challenges and the chances before you in life. And those who live in communities like the one that my honourable friend represents, or that I represent in Hull North and Cottingham, will always know best what the barriers and the opportunities are in their local area. And that's why I'm committed to working closely with mayoral strategic authorities, local government, the voluntary and community sector and others to make sure that employment support works for people no matter where they live. I regularly meet with mayors and leaders in local government, as do my officials, to make sure that we are designing employment support that meets the needs of those local communities. In December, I met with the Mayoral Council. Last week, the Minister for Skills and I met with the Local Government Association's Inclusive Growth Committee to hear from local leaders working across England, including those representing towns, on youth employment and the Jobs and Careers Service. And earlier today, I met with the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and we will continue to listen to and engage with local leaders as we reform employment support. Now, a core strength of the DWP is our network of job centres and work coaches. These are on high streets all around the country with staff who are knowledgeable and passionate about the communities they serve. We've got to make the most of this, which is why we're building a new Jobs and Careers Service that moves away from that one-size-fits-all approach that has been mentioned several times this afternoon. We are instead building a locally responsive service designed to meet the different needs of local labour markets, local people and local employers. We're already testing new elements of this service through our Pathfinder in Wakefield, which I went to see myself before Christmas. And we've also matched up Job Centre Plus boundaries with mayoral strategic authorities to strengthen partnerships between job centres, local government and other local stakeholders. And my honourable friend, the member for Southport, mentioned the efforts to make job centres more human. And I have to say, this isn't the first time that this is, there's been effort put into this. I was reading that in the 1940s, as part of his drive to humanise the employment exchanges that existed then, Ernest Bevin felt it necessary to issue an instruction that staff should say good morning to members of the public when they came into the employment exchange looking for help. So fortunately, I think we are starting from a better point than that today, but we want to make sure that job centres are places that people want to go to get support, not that they shy away from. So we're making sure the new Jobs and Careers Service is less about benefit administration and box ticking, and that it better uses technology so we can free up our work coaches' time to focus on giving people support that's tailored to their needs. In the English Devolution White Paper, we set out, again, the important role of mayors in driving local growth and supporting labour market and skills needs. So let me turn to some of the locally led employment support that we are investing in already. This includes £1 billion through our Connect to Work programme. I recently saw this support in action in Lewisham, where a neurodiverse young man told me how that personalised support that he was receiving from the team was helping him in his work as a swimming teacher. And he's one of 300,000 disabled people or people with health conditions and other complex barriers across England and Wales who will be supporting through Connect to Work by the end of the decade. Mayors and local authorities are being funded via grants to enable delivery of local Connect to Work programmes. Over 2/5 of delivery areas are now up and running, and we have given areas considerable flexibility in how they deliver this service, reflecting both local priorities and the other support available in the area. We're also expanding Workwell across England, the whole of England, over the next 3 years to support up to 250,000 people. And I visited Workwell in Cambridge a few months ago and saw the brilliant way that they are working together with local authorities, integrated care boards and Job Centre Plus to provide a single route to personalised integrated work and health support. This recognises that local areas are well placed to knit together local services, and it's for that reason that we've also commissioned local Get Working Britain plans in all areas of England. I just wanted at this point to say the Liberal Democrat spokesperson raised the issue of access to work, and I heard what he said. He will know there was an NAO report produced at the end of last week. Demand has soared for access to work. We are already putting additional staff in, and we're looking at what more can be done because we recognise how important access to work is. I also just wanted to mention about the voluntary and community sector, because that was raised by a number of members this afternoon, and how important their role is in employment support. with the mayoral strategic authorities, we're working closely with this sector to deliver 17 economic inactivity and youth guarantee trailblazers. And we set up those to test new innovative support ways of delivering that support, delivered by local partners. And the partnership is about engaging with communities at that grassroots level to help them access holistic support to move towards work. And I heard the calls this afternoon for the funding to be made available to that particular sector on a sustainable basis with multi-year settlements. And I just wanted to say again, there was mention about local authority funding. The local government finance settlement is the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government's most significant move yet to make English local government more sustainable. The government is making good on long overdue promises to fundamentally update the way we fund local authorities. We are delivering fairer funding, targeting money where it's needed most through the first multi-year settlement in decades. My honourable friend, the member for Southport, spoke about the long-lasting effect on his life when he couldn't get a job as a young man. And I want to just comment on young people. For so many, the consequences of what happens at the start of your working life can cascade then down the years. And that is why we're putting a real focus into supporting young people, not least through our youth guarantee. And at the budget, we announced expansion of the youth guarantee backed by £820 million worth of investment. And that goes to the honourable gentleman for Birmingham Periborough and his question about supporting young people into infrastructure projects. This investment will create around 300,000 more opportunities to gain workplace experience and training for young people. But I also just wanted to take issue with the honourable gentleman for his comments where I think he failed to acknowledge that if support and help is offered to a young person, which it will be through the youth guarantee, that there is also a responsibility on the young person to take up that offer of assistance and support and that opportunity. And I think that is part of the social contract in this country. I've also mentioned already the locally led trailblazers, but there's also for young people the expansion of youth hubs to more than 360 areas across Great Britain. And this is important because these are helping us to reach young people where they are, in places such as football clubs and other sports facilities. My honourable friend mentioned the importance of delivering support in familiar settings, and I'm glad he highlighted, and several other members did too, about Jobs Plus, which delivers community-based employment support through the social housing sector. As an example of that, it's being piloted in 10 sites across England. And I also just want to finally mention the Milburn Review, which is looking at why we do have nearly 1 million young people who are not in education, employment or training. It's due to report in the summer, because we cannot allow that waste of talent at nearly 1 million young people. It's not good for those young people, and it's not good for our economy or for the taxpayer either. So in closing, whether it's our trailblazers, youth hubs, job centre reform or programmes like Connect to Work and Work Well, we are determined that people get the support that suits them, regardless of where they live or what their circumstances are. People's lives are complex and they can face all sorts of barriers to work, whether it's health, skills, transport, housing and much more. That's why an ecosystem of support which is locally tailored can ensure that no one is left behind. This requires a joined-up approach where people can access offers of support that they trust and that treat them as an individual and as a whole person. And that is why the government has committed to learn from place-based support, such as the Economic Inactivity and Youth Guarantee Trailblazers and Connect to Work, and it's why we're committed to truly embedding and tailoring our new Jobs and Careers Service to meet the needs of local people and employers. As we develop our Jobs and Careers Service, our Youth Guarantee and Pathways to Work, we will be working closely with local government, including mayoral strategic authorities, to ensure that these reflect the communities that they serve. Ensuring employment support is integrated in and meets the needs of local communities will help people to benefit from the purpose, pride and independence of good work and to fulfil their potential.
Briefly wind up.
I'd like to thank you, Dr Morrison, for your exemplary chairing of this debate this afternoon, and also thank honourable members who have contributed to the debate. What's come through really clearly, I think, is that employment policy works when it starts with the realities of people's lives, and that for those furthest from the labour market, progress works best when the support that people are given is human and rooted in place. The message I hope the Minister will take away is a simple one. The central systems we've got in place matter, but they can't do all of this alone. Place-based delivery, person-centred support, genuine partnership are all essential if we're serious about tackling this sort of scourge of inactivity. And crucially, funding is massively important, and certainty on funding is massively important. I know the government will reflect on how future policy can embed the approaches we've talked about this afternoon. And I'd like to thank everybody for their contribution to the debate. Thank you.
The question is that this House consider place-based employment support programmes. As many as are that have been say aye. To the contrary, no. Think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.